Alright, we are at video lecture 8, Roman numeral 7. But let me go back to the Anabaptists for just a minute from the last video. As I was saying in the very end there, the Anabaptists were persecuted a lot by other Europeans, both Protestants and Catholics. And I was telling you about how a lot of them were tortured and killed because of their beliefs. And I just kind of hate to end it so abruptly, but I had to stop at that point. But I was just going to tell you kind of out of interest sake, the number one way to execute an Anabaptist in those days, as you might guess, was drowning. If an Anabaptist were, to refuse to turn away from his or her beliefs, the governments in the countries where they often lived would execute them through drowning, because that's what they wanted to be, was to be baptized by immersion, right? Well, they give it to them. Anyway, on to Roman numeral 7 now, the English Reformation. The English Reformation. Now, I've talked to you a little bit about what was going on in Switzerland, a little bit what was going on in Germany, and a lot of other places in Europe. Not a lot was changing. The beliefs were remaining the same. Okay, in France, a big country, the Catholic Church remained strong. In Spain, the Catholic Church remained strong. But in England, the Protestant Reformation does take hold, but it's not really about spiritual matters. It's a little bit different. So, letter A under Roman numeral 7 is all about politics. That's one thing to remember when we think about the English Reformation. It's really not about spiritual beliefs. It's about political power, you see. When you have the Catholic Church in your country, when that is the official religion of your country, the leaders of the Catholic Church, in particular the Pope, has a lot of authority over the people there. Okay? Well, in England, by 1539, the king doesn't like this anymore. He doesn't want the Pope to have authority over his people anymore. He doesn't want the Catholic Church to have some kind of a sovereignty over what goes on in his country. He wants to rule it himself. So let's talk about that king for just a little bit. His name is Henry VIII. He's one of the most famous kings of England. I'm at letter B now. And Henry VIII had a problem with the Pope. He didn't like the idea that the Catholic Church had so much authority over his people. All right, let's get on down to it. Letter C, Catherine of Aragon. Catherine of Aragon was the wife of Henry VIII. And by the time we get to 1539, when it all breaks down for the English, they'd been married for many years. Okay? They had had a long marriage relationship, not a particularly loving, caring one. Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, I talked about them in Unit 1. They were very loving and caring, very close it seems. Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon, it was a political marriage, and they didn't have that kind of a bond. Henry VIII was one of those guys who was going to get what he wanted, and his wife was not giving him what he wanted. That brings us to letter D. What he wanted was a son, not a daughter. He had a daughter, her name was Mary, okay, who would have been heir to his throne. She could have been the next queen of England, and eventually would become the queen of England. But Henry VIII, wanted a son to take the throne after him, and that's usually how things worked back then. Boys tended to have political power over girls, and if you had a son and a daughter, even if the daughter was older, usually the boy would be the heir to the throne. Okay? But Catherine of Aragon was getting beyond the childbearing years and was not producing any sons for Henry VIII, and he did not like that. So do you know what Henry wanted? What Henry wanted was a divorce. He wanted to get a new wife who could give him a son. Now the problem with getting a divorce in those days in Europe was that the Catholic Church did not allow for divorces. There were no legitimate divorces. If you were to get married and then seek a new relationship, the Catholic Church would not allow you to get out of your original relationship, okay, with a spouse. Henry knew this. So the only other way for him to get out of this marriage with Catherine of Aragon without killing her, the only other way for him to get out of the marriage other than killing her or divorcing her, which was totally unacceptable, was to get an annulment. The Catholic Church did allow for an annulment. What an annulment is when you act like that marriage never happened. Okay? Usually the only way an annulment could happen is if you have a couple who are married but they never consummate the marriage. They never have sexual relations with each other. And there are other ways. But in this sense, that's usually it. If you and your spouse never have that connection, then you can have an annulment. Okay? Well, Catherine and Henry have been married for years, and they had a daughter who was just about grown anyway. Come on, you can't give these two an annulment. Doesn't matter how much Henry wants one. Remember, Henry VIII is the King of England, and he's one of those kind of guys who likes to get what he wants. The Catholic Church would not give him what he wanted. He wanted an annulment. He wanted to no longer be married to Catherine of Aragon so that he could marry his girlfriend, Anne Boleyn. That's letter E. There was a movie about her. Alright, Anne Boleyn was Henry's girlfriend. Now, you know, people were willing to turn a blind eye to the fact that Henry was cheating on his wife. That happened kind of all the time with guys like that, with royalty and stuff. But Anne Boleyn was a young woman who was the kind of the handmaiden of Catherine of Aragon. She was her personal servant. And Henry wanted to marry her. They'd already been having a relationship and stuff like that. But the Catholic Church would not allow for it. So, you know what Henry did? Letter F, Archbishop Thomas Cranmer. What Henry did was he went to the Archbishop of Canterbury, the head of the Catholic Church in England. He was under the authority of the Pope. And he goes to Thomas Cranmer, who was his personal friend, and he says, Thomas, I want an annulment, and I want to end my relation with Catherine. And since Thomas and Henry were close, and Thomas was kind of under the authority of Henry, but he was also under the authority of the Pope, remember, he gave it to him. He told him his marriage to Catherine of Aragon no longer existed, and he did not have to remain faithful to her. He could go ahead and marry someone else, and he quickly did. After this annulment that the Catholic Church saw as illegitimate, Henry quickly married Catherine of Aragon. Now, the Catholic Church excommunicated Henry VIII and all of England. That's tough, isn't it? For those English people who accepted and trusted and believed in the Catholic Church, that meant they all had to go to hell because their king wanted a younger wife who could produce a son for him. That's rough, isn't it? Well, that was the situation. Henry VIII, you know what he said? I don't care. I don't care what the Pope says. And in letter G, Act of Supremacy, 1534, Henry VIII established the new Church of England. He separated all English people from the Catholic Church and established a new church called the Church of England. Okay? That is what the Act of Supremacy did. It created the Church of England. Well, the Pope, of course, still said that Henry VIII and all of England was condemned to hell, but Henry didn't care, and he was able to convince the people of England that it didn't matter. Okay? And we see, letter H, the creation of the Church of England, a.k.a., also known as the Anglican Church. It starts with an A, not an E. And that is the official Church of England. And it is really just almost exactly like the Catholic Church, with a couple of exceptions. One thing is that the priests can get married in the Anglican Church, and that divorces are permitted in the Anglican Church. Otherwise, it's a whole lot like the Catholic Church. Now, you may not have heard of many Anglican churches if you're from around Mississippi, but there is a church that came out of the Anglican Church. When the Anglican Church came to the Americas, when it came to North America with the 13 colonies that later became the United States, it was called the Episcopal Church. Okay, so today the Anglican Church in the United States is called the Episcopal Church. So anyway, to make a long story short, guess what? Anne Boleyn did not produce any sons either. Henry had her head chopped off. Henry ended up marrying 6 women. And I think the third or fourth one did actually give him a son. The son was born Edward VI. Edward was born very sickly and ill. He did gain the throne, but did not last very long. He died as a child king, and Henry's daughter Mary became the Queen of England. So eventually and Mary, of course, was the daughter of Catherine of Aragon. Okay. All right, well, we'll come back to her. I said Bloody Mary there, and there's a story behind that, but I'll pick it up on the next video. So that's all for this one.